And a good afternoon to the UCLA Anderson Alumni Network. My name is David Cooley. I'm the Director of Alumni Career Services here in the Office of Alumni Relations. We're coming to you in a very exciting week. Obviously, the Bloomberg Business Week reports rankings came out this week, and Anderson has jumped to number 12. We're very excited about that. And we're particularly excited about the success of our events, our Worldwide Welcome Week events that happened throughout October, introducing our new dean, longtime faculty, award-winning faculty member, Tony Bernardo, now Dean Tony Bernardo. So we're excited to welcome him, excited with his plans for the future and all that is going on within the Anderson Alumni Network. So without further delay, we've got a new topic, and we're going to start with two people online initially. But the topic today is utilizing AI, artificial intelligence, in recruiting and how to gain that competitive advantage. We have two people on the line, both Sam Wallace and James Wright from Carmichael Fisher. And Sam, why don't I first start with you, and then you can talk a little bit about what your firm does, and then James will kick off the presentation. So thanks a lot for doing this today.
No, terrific. And thank you so much for including Carmichael Fisher and partnering with us on this really important topic. I'm Sam Wallace. I'm the Global Head of Technology for Carmichael Fisher. I'm based in LA and actually met David at a networking event where we were talking about brand and the importance of brand and the convergence of technology and many other things as we think about talent. And through that relationship, we've had the opportunity to develop with James the presentation that we're delighted to share today. As a global search firm, there are so many things that are important to what we do, and the way that technology influences talent is a really critical factor in that. I'm actually at a diversity event here in New York today, and AI has come up as a really critical piece of how does the technology influence the way that we think about D&I across a talent landscape. And I know that the new dean, Tony Bernardo's interest in D&I is very real and very relevant as the future of Anderson and all of us is going. So thrilled to be participating in the event. And congratulations on the recent positioning of this Anderson School. It's terrific news, and we're thrilled to be partnering with you on this presentation. And with that, James has done the research. He's put in the hard yards, so I'll let James take the lead from here and take you through the presentation, but thrilled to be joining you all.
Thanks very much, Sam. I'm based in London. I'm a consultant within the technology practice here at Carmichael Fisher. We're a search firm that cover a number of different areas, but we are a truly global operation, and the technology practice builds part of that organization. Now, as an individual, to give some context, I came from academia and recently published my studies on artificial intelligence within the recruitment sector. And as part of our discussions with David, we've decided to partner to try and give advice on how, from a candidate perspective, to really utilize the AI and make sure to benefit from it rather than from being harmed from it. So we're going to go through a few different areas. Where we are with recruitment right now, the current state of play with artificial intelligence, a few concepts within AI and how it can be applied, and a couple of interesting case studies within real life, one showing where it hasn't gone so right and caused issue, and a second one showing the real potential of AI within the recruitment scene. Then we'll switch the focus and actually start focusing on you as the candidate. How can you get ahead of the competition when applying for a role, and how to utilize AI? And then finally wrapping up with any conclusions, and of course any questions that you might have from the content of this presentation. So starting where we are right now, it's safe to say hiring and recruitment is an imperfect art. It's not very data driven at this state, and this is looking at across the whole level of recruitment, from really graduate high volume all the way up to executive search. A lot of hiring right now is based really on perception rather than true facts and figures. That said, with the introduction of automation, artificial intelligence, this is really due to change. And the reason why that is automation has existed within recruitment for some time, where repetitive tasks can be automated. But artificial intelligence has provided the opportunity to really involve it with the non-repetitive tasks within recruitment. The challenge with recruitment is every interview is different, every engagement with a client is different, and therefore you do need to have a software that can really alter itself every time. So we're in the phase of a revolution with the use of artificial intelligence, and it is impacting every single industry. Recruitment is no different, and it really is an inevitability rather than the possibility now. So AI is the key. There are just two key areas to really consider, and of course this is simplifying it, but strong data and strong technology are what are critical here. And I'll explain that in a bit more depth. Strong data, data is the food of your decision making with artificial intelligence, and there's always the risk of organizations using outdated or poor data sets to put into their technology, and as a result, the outcome is completely wrong. I think a really good important thing to note is that AI is stupid unless you have the right data set. And it's not a one size fits all situation. Going on to the technology, it's same applies. If you've got poor software and good data, it still doesn't work. The outcome will not be correct. So the key is marrying the two up and ultimately having a good result in the end. So candidates really need to understand the use case of AI within recruitment. As I said, it's an inevitability that it's going to influence every stage of recruitment, even at the top level. But you could harm your application process if you don't know the use case of it. And actually buying into it is going to benefit you. It's been proven that if you don't believe in some of these psychometric tests, that it will actually be a negative outcome for you, and you'll have a lower score compared with individuals who really have bought in. So it's really critical to understand the value of this. As I said, we're in the early stages of this AI revolution, and as a result, progress is quite slow. Adoption is quite minimal. You're seeing some trailblazers within industries who are adopting AI across all their processes, but there's risk associated with the unknown of how the outcome will be with AI, and as a result, progress is relatively slow, particularly within the recruitment sector at this stage. But once it is starting to be adopted by some of the major players, we'll see that pace exponentially rise. Right now, the technology isn't quite complete, and therefore mistakes are made. But I think it's a very important process to learn from the mistakes and then improve upon them. So a few different areas that AI will influence recruitment, and I'm going to briefly go through them now, and then we'll dive deeper into them one by one. But AI in job descriptions is already a very prominent environment for AI to really benefit the candidates. We've seen technologies that can assess the written content within a job description and remove gender-biased words and sentences to improve the application rate of all data sets. The reason why this is good is simply a human writing a job description isn't good enough anymore. And with the volume of people who apply for roles, it's really critical that we open it up to everyone. And it's proven that we can improve the application rate of women in tech through altering a job description. And it's a really big area, and it's just the start. Then moving on to sourcing, we're seeing this quite prominent even in executive search. using smart algorithms on a wide variety of platforms to widen the pool of candidates and identify individuals that you may not previously have seen or even considered for a role. Also smart marketing. An individual that I interviewed for my paper that's been published was suggesting that their organization are using smart algorithms to identify individuals who have recently relocated and therefore potentially open. You're more likely to change roles if you've just moved house. And as a result, reaching out to these individuals and engaging with them before they've even really considered it themselves is now a reality. Moving on to the interviewing, it's surprising how much of an interview process can now be fully automated without the involvement of a human. We are seeing this at the graduate level, and it's becoming more and more common. And a lot of this is done through behavioral theory that's been backed up by data science over the last 20, 30 years. So it is strong data, it is strong technology. And as a result, we are seeing technologies that are removing the unconscious bias that human recruiters naturally have. And as a result, we're seeing a much better candidate experience, speeding up processes that sometimes took months and reducing it to weeks. And then engagement, we're seeing this all the time. It's not a new environment to see chatbots on websites, but we're seeing it integrated within the recruitment process to help schedule interviews with candidates, answer any questions that a candidate might have about a potential new role or the process in general, but also providing very objective feedback. I think there's a common fear within the recruitment ecosystem to not offend a candidate. And when an AI software provides feedback, it can be as objective and blunt as it likes, because you're not going to be offended by that data, as it is completely true. And then finally, onboarding. It's not a major part of this presentation, predominantly because it wasn't the area of study that I had, but I thought it was important to actually involve this in the process. So onboarding now is becoming more and more automated. You're getting software that's supporting new employees in new businesses, letting them understand and settle in within an organization that they're unfamiliar with. So we're seeing a number of different processes there that overall, in theory, if everything goes right, improves the candidate experience and is good for everyone. However, let's go to when it goes wrong. Amazon's a perfect example. I think they did as much as they could to keep this story quiet, as it was some pretty horrific PR from their side. Back in 2014, Amazon developed a software development process to assess resumes for applicants across all levels within the business. So they took data from the organization to see who was good within the business and then try and replicate that. So they were using artificial intelligence back then. They were one of the first businesses, certainly at that scale, to really trial this, to provide candidates with a rating between 1 and 5, judging suitability. And as a result, actually took a lot of hiring hours out of the equation, because they could put a job out there. This software would essentially assess that job description and then bring the best profiles to the table and eliminate the ones that they deemed inappropriate for the role. However, there's a significant issue with this, and the main one being that it was collecting old data from purely Amazon. Amazon has, and it already is now, but it was previously even more so, a very fast scaling business that really wasn't focused around diversity. It was focusing about getting the talent in as fast as it could, because it was growing so quickly. As a result, the resumes within the data set were predominantly men. They were not focused on diversity whatsoever. And as a result, the AI that was in place was making judgments that preferred male resumes over that of female resumes, in effect creating a sexist AI. However, because there was no human involved within the initial stages, this went on for a number of years. 3 years that no one realized what was going on. But what it was doing was it was actually downgrading any resumes that indicated the profile was female, because they didn't have that data set on board, and therefore favoring the similar profiles of men. And they further lowered the score of candidates for women who were in all women colleges. So it was a disastrous result for Amazon, who were trying to innovate. They were trying to improve diversity by making it more objective. But the unintended consequence of using old data was that they made their situation even worse. Of course, they found this out in 2017. They were transparent and made it clear that they had made a mistake, and they shut down the program, eliminating the automation process in its entirety. However, it does go right, and occasionally we're seeing vast improvements. And I think Unilever really saw the mistakes of Amazon and learned from them. They diversified their data sets, making it more objective and a less biased process, and took great care in using new technologies that had improved upon what Amazon had used. So you will see now, and it's quite widely publicized in the news, that Unilever now automate a large proportion of their hiring process. Unilever have thousands and thousands of applicants every year. So the attraction section of AI within recruitment does not apply to Unilever in this sense. And they are only automating the early stages, so the graduate level, and now the senior management, nowhere near executive at this stage. So what they've done is they've introduced a process with video interviews, but not the kind of video interview most people are familiar with. This is speaking directly to a screen with no one on the other side. This isn't no involvement from a recruiter at all. It's using facial recognition and speech assessment to essentially assess the profile of the individual and how strong they might be for a given role. After they've done that video interview, which lasts about 15 minutes, they move on to a test process, which is known as gamification. Essentially, they are short games that understand and assess the creativity and the personality of a given individual, and understand whether that candidate will work well as a leader or a standalone contributor. So this is very valuable. I think gamification is the most valuable aspect of AI in recruitment, particularly at the executive level. So it's an area that at Carmichael Fisher we're taking very seriously and already involve ourselves in at this time. Unilever saved 70,000 hours and counting of recruitment time. It's a very impressive feat. They've rolled this automation out on an international scale, and therefore essentially creating a much better and more refined process. What they're doing is they're cutting out a large proportion of the candidate pool at an early stage, saving everyone time by assessing the profiles early on and making a judgment call of whether or not they're right for the business. What they've seen is that the people that come to the final stage and the only face-to-face stage of the process, 20% of those individuals who come face-to-face actually end up getting a job with Unilever. That's a very, very high number. You'd be looking at single digits previously, so it's very impressive to see that. It's been so successful, as I mentioned, that they've decided to introduce it to their senior management and mid-tier roles. It's proof that that the game is shifting. We're seeing more and more automation at a more senior level, which really proves my point that it's very important for individuals at the level of the viewers today to start paying attention to this area, because it will start influencing the executive level as well. And obviously a big motivation for a business like Unilever is saving money. It's the motivation that makes them invest millions into AI technology in the first place, but they're saving over $1 million a year already. And that's only going to grow as they involve more and more levels in the process. But what's even more interesting is that they're actually improving their diversity as a result of using this technology. They've increased it by 16%, which of a business in that level is phenomenal. So beyond that, and this links into the time saving side of things, but they're reducing the time to hire by 90%. Their average hire time was 4 months, and they've reduced it to 2 weeks for the graduate level roles, which is clearly a vast improvement, but it also improves the candidate experience. It means more people can apply to roles because they're not going through a lengthy process, and it reduces the dropout rates as well. So let's look into how you as a candidate can get ahead. I think it's very important to consider a number of different areas here. So we're going to consider approximately 6 different areas. The first one is resumes, and this applies to AI, but it also applies to everyday recruitment as well. So I think it's valuable to make sure that your resume has clear, actionable data sets within it. We see it too often that resumes come through to us at Carmichael Fisher at the very top level that clearly have not had time and attention spent on them. And it's too wordy. There's no real clear achievements within those resumes. And as a result, it makes any interview process quite challenging because there aren't really that many discussion points. Video interviews, it's pretty clear to see that these are becoming more and more common. But with the introduction with AI within video interviews these days, it becomes even more important to be very well lit in your environment, but also that you've got a plain background like I do behind me, so that an AI can clearly see every part of you and actually distinguish your movements as opposed to the background. We have seen that individuals do suffer from lower scores on these automated processes when they're in loud, noisy environments where the voice isn't clear, but also the background isn't clear, and they're not able to assess the facial points. As I said, HireView, which is one of these video softwares, that analyzes approximately 25,000 data points in 10 minutes. So it's important that every single area of you is captured. Moving on, it sounds very obvious, and I know I'm not doing it today, but wearing headphones with a microphone in a video interview is critical. Again, it's making sure that your audio clarity is very clear, and it's as simple as having a strong and stable internet connection to ensure that the capture of data is strong. Moving on, believing in technology is critical. I referenced this slightly earlier, but if you don't believe in the technology that's being used, likelihood is it will not believe in you either. I was speaking to one of the key individuals for AI analytics for HR at Deloitte, and he leads that operation. And he was saying one of their clients was trialing one of the softwares, and it was the CEO who was trialing it. And the software came back, and its assessment was that this individual did not believe in the process. And the CEO actually realized that it was spot on. And as a result, if it had been a candidate, then it would have resulted in a negative outcome. So it's very critical that you do believe in the capabilities of these softwares. But it's not all about the software. It's not all about the AI, particularly not at the executive level. I cannot emphasize how important this is now, and also moving forward in the future, probably more so, to be very well connected with the recruitment team involved. Personal relationships at this level are vital. Knowing the personality of the person from our perspective that we're putting forward is vital, but having that constant engagement and building that relationship will put you in a much better position when we look to represent you for a client, and it puts you in a good position. And with all the noise around data and AI, I think in recruitment, there's always going to be that human element, and making sure that you're good in that environment is key. So moving forward, I think, we've just lost lights. One moment. There we go. I complained about being in a badly lit environment as well. So making sure that you actually utilize this AI software to essentially see your feedback. So don't be afraid to ask a recruiter once you've been through one of these processes to obtain that feedback, whether or not an artificial intelligence software has been involved. Making sure that you develop yourself from an interview is valuable. So many people don't seem to want to dig into why they haven't got a role, but actually it's the most important point in developing yourself in your career. And also when an AI software is involved, it's going to be quite critical. So don't be offended by the results of the assessment. Normally these assessments are based on decades of data science. So it's probably quite an accurate representation of your downfalls. So make sure to utilize that and address them if you can. So let's look at the resume in a little bit more depth. There are a few areas to consider here. Right now, they're probably the most important area of an application, but in the next decade, I foresee, even at the executive level, for the standard resume to become redundant. We're seeing more and more movement towards video CVs and virtual CVs. Obviously, the rise of the likes of LinkedIn means that, to a certain extent, the resume is redundant. That said, at this point, it enables you to share more information with a potential client that you don't want to disclose publicly. However, as I said previously, resumes are underutilized in many senses. So what we need to see on a resume is actionable insights. Facts and figures are every bit as important as your name and address and mobile number. If we don't have actionable insights where you've achieved a certain level, what kind of P&Ls you've managed, we're not going to be able to really understand whether you're the right fit for the role. And we could get hours into an interview process and then discover something that we could have realized very early on. But also, on the flip side, we may not even bring you to an interview process if your CV or resume has not had the attention it needs. So it's one of the most important areas to consider. So I will show you, once we finish this slide, a real life example of a profile that I interviewed about a month back, a very senior CEO of a multinational business, who has a perfect example of these keywords and highlights that need to be included. But it's very simple information that might seem obvious, but maybe when you go back to look at your resume tomorrow, you might think it's worth addressing these areas. A very, very simplistic thing, one of the most basic areas, but a little bit of a bugbear, I would imagine, from most interviewers and recruiters, is the formats of CVs and resumes vary all the time. The easy way to address this: PDF your resume. We don't like formats that make it complicated. The amount of times that you might get one that's pages rather than a Word document that then changes the format completely. Just keep it simple and have it as a PDF. It also helps when you are applying through a digital platform, because it will always accept a PDF. Moving beyond that, your resume in simplistic terms should essentially mirror your LinkedIn profile. So when I receive a resume and I go online and look at your digital footprint, it should essentially mimic that. But what you need to do is add on extra info that you don't want to make public on LinkedIn that might be valuable in an interview process within your resume. So some really interesting facts. I've included a few different areas here. So this is on a global scale at all levels, but the average number of resumes considered for a role at any one role is 250. I would say within the executive search scene, you're probably looking at about 50 to 100 profiles per role, which means that your resume needs to stand out, but it needs to be easily read and easily accessed. You've got about just over 6 seconds to impress a recruiter when it comes to your resume. So what does that mean? Well, it means that you've got 6 seconds for me to go, I'm willing to give you more time. So very simplistically, have your name, a small bio, and your summary of your experience on your first page to give that actual insight. It's always clear to see that the individuals who get roles within senior level positions have stats within their resume, and it's shown with very recent research that I discovered 40% boost in your hireability when you include statistics on your resume. This is unarguable. So this is an example of the resume that I discussed earlier. Very experienced CEO from the Asia Pacific region. She is a very high potential individual with a very strong growth trajectory. And I've blown this up for ease of reading. So it's not the same format, but it's in the same order. Essentially, a few bullet points giving coverage of some key achievements and general background, a summary of the experience, and then each role broken down into key areas. And I've only included the first role, the most recent role here, because naturally it wouldn't fit all on one slide. However, it's pretty clear to see that what this candidate has done is highlighted key areas of interest that she wants me as a recruiter and the client to see. And so we're seeing examples of, in the last 10 years, achieved improvements of 20 million, 10% growth in revenue. That's proof that she has made an actual improvement to a business. Creative thinker, problem solver, overseas experience. These are all keywords that when someone looks into a database and wants to find someone, they're going to find this resume first because it's got all these key areas involved. So don't be afraid to make your resume sound a little bit flamboyant, because I think it's really critical to do so. Moving on to video interviews. Video interviews are now taking place in every role. In the last year of recruitment at executive level, there's not been a process that hasn't involved one of these for us at Carmichael Fisher. So they're impossible to avoid. So it's critical that you get very good at them. And I mentioned this earlier, but AI technologies in here are being brought in by a number of big businesses now, not necessarily in the way that Unilever have done, which eliminates the recruiter entirely, but often software backing the recruiter and enabling a cross assessment of one another, ensuring that the right decision is being made. And essentially validating the decision of a recruiter. So you may not even know as a candidate that you're being assessed by artificial intelligence or not. So it's important to make sure you take all the necessary steps to get ahead here. So don't be afraid of being nervous when it comes to an automated system. It's very difficult for anyone to speak at a screen and not have any response. So it's worth practicing your elevator pitch in describing why you're good for a role. Give it a go in your own time without having the pressure of being recorded. And that will help you. It will make you more natural. It will make you more engaging with the camera. And I think it will ultimately improve your chances of getting the opportunity. A very simple one, and I did mention this earlier, but making sure that you're evenly and well lit is critical. We've seen some issues with artificial intelligence in video interviews, struggling to pick up facial features. And that's a very key area for you. but also looking directly at the camera and being engaging like you would with a standard recruiter is important to build that rapport. And if you are being assessed by a human as well, making sure that you're engaging and making that eye contact gives you the implication that you're confident and engaged in the opportunity. Again, wearing headphones, I won't be laborious on this point, but making sure that you're heard well is so important. It makes up almost 50% of the data points that are collected is your voice recognition. So making sure that you are heard there. If possible, stand for your video interview. Might not immediately sound like something that is important, but if you have a standing desk, do utilize it. You're going to project your voice much better than when you're seated, and it will come across much better. So give it a go if you haven't done previously. As I mentioned earlier, 25,000 data points in a 10-minute interview with HireVue. That sounds like an incredible number, and it is, but bearing in mind it's assessing so many different areas. So not only your voice and your facial features, but your movements, your hand movements, the way you're positioned, what you're wearing, everything is accounted for. So it's very important to take every single preparation. You're 60% more likely to stay in a role when AI has been involved in your process. What that means essentially is role fit is better assessed when AI is involved. So have that confidence that you're actually going to be more likely to enjoy your role if you're in a process of AI. And that's, I think, a very important point to note. A lot of people don't like the idea of being assessed by artificial intelligence, but actually it's going to benefit you in the long run and get you into a position that you enjoy rather than going for a role that's not for you. So I think it's a very key area to consider. In my research, and I've just alluded to that, but yeah, 73% of respondents of the survey I conducted for my research were negative towards automation of recruitment. And looking deeper into that, and from a psychological point of view, I think it's the fear of being deselected by a robot is a bit concerning. But bearing in mind, this is based on data that's been built up for such a long time. This is data science. You're much more likely to be in a more effective process when we're looking at past hires that have gone right, as well as considering those that have gone wrong. Individuals who have no training on managing bias, which unfortunately is very common in the recruitment industry. We're fortunate at Carmichael Fisher to have a diversity task force that educate every individual to ensure that we are monitoring our unconscious biases, but that's not very common. So you need to take reassurance that you're going to have a better process with AI. Now, gamification, this is the area that, from my perspective, I'm most passionate about. As part of my research, I interviewed and took part in research in Arctic Shores, which is one example of a gamification software. Essentially what it's doing is assessing the personality and role fit for an individual by putting them in certain scenarios. This can be very adaptable and can change depending on the role you're taking on, but it's very applicable in the executive level recruitment because you're making game-changing decisions for a business and they need to understand how you're going to react in certain scenarios. So it's very important not to consider these as games, which is easily done because they do seem very simplistic. If you've ever tried one, you'll know. It's as simple as playing a game of chess on a computer, but it does really matter. This is one of the most important areas, particularly when you're in a very competitive process. This is the ultimate decision that will help a client make a decision on who to bring in board. Quite often, when we're doing a process and we bring 5 people to a final shortlist, normally 2 or 3 are at the final round, and it's very difficult for a client to make that decision. So then they introduce a psychometric or a gamification test to make that final decision and takes it out of their hands. So making sure that you understand how important these are and to take them seriously and give them the time that they deserve is very important, because this will, I guarantee, influence everyone who is going for a C-suite level role now. As a result, believe in the technology. I'm saying this again, it's really important, because if you get the lower scores, you're not going to get through the process. And this is one of the most important areas of a process, because it is going to be at the end normally. You can't fool these systems. The best part about gamification is it is essentially testing your personality and your aptitude for risk. And therefore you can do it as many times as you like, and it's generally very easy to keep it accurate and repetitive in that way. So in a 5 to 10 minute test for Arctic Shores, they collect 12,000 data points, and that is not considering any voice or facial recognition. So it's gaining so much more data on your personality, which I think is a very valuable insight. And again, it's reducing costs up higher for clients, and it's improving the quality of selection. So again, it's about retention. So you're improving your chances of getting a role that you're going to remain in for the long term. I'm going to touch on this again. This kind of takes away from the AI side, but making sure that you're well connected with the recruiter, whether it is the consultant or the client, it's vital to have that direct touch point of a human. You're never going to lose that full automation side. You're always going to have influences of artificial intelligence within a process, particularly in the next few years where experiments are made. That said, the executive search consultant is always going to be there to really understand the touch point of the client and yourself as a candidate. So making sure that you're well connected has never been so important when everything is losing touch points. So essentially, gaining feedback and taking advice from a search consultant, I think is vital. So a consultant is there to provide advice based on their knowledge of the business that they've been retained by for potentially years. So really digging deeper and asking the prudent questions is vital, and it isn't asked enough. So really do dive deeper into that. And when you have an assessment and it doesn't go right, don't be offended by it. I think it's a chance of development. And then particularly when it's a personality test, so we use the likes of Hogan, that data and feedback is available for you to use. So make sure you do use it. It's an investment of your time to go through an interview process, and if you haven't made it all the way through, it's important to learn why and improve upon yourself. So make sure you do dig deeper into that and really understand your downfalls as a profile, and don't take it personally. Take it as an opportunity to develop. So an automated platform with 25,000 data points is invaluable opportunity. It's the kind of information that people pay for. So going through a free application process, if you will, is worth doing in that sense. So both interviews and gamification are built on the foundation of data science. So I can't stress this enough, that we're not looking at a random software that's just been built. This is decades of work that's been put into this. And it's the data that's new, but the technology has been existed for a very, very long time. So at present, and this is a abysmal stat, but only 2.6% of candidates on average who were unsuccessful in a process receive specific and valuable feedback. Generally speaking, it's quite wishy-washy, not a huge amount of development opportunity. AI is set to change that for the better, and we're looking to see an improvement to 100% valuable feedback and actionable information for you to improve as a person. So make sure to do that. At the moment, however, approximately 80% of roles are not publicly advertised. They may go through a search firm like ourselves, who we do not advertise, or they go through their internal hiring process, which just proves how important at the executive level it is to have that personal connection. AI is not going to fix that. You're going to have to make your outreach and network with individuals like us to understand. And finally, 89% of companies use social media to recruit talent. So make sure your LinkedIn is up to date, make sure it's accurate. And the amount of profiles that I see that are outdated and not looked after, it's very poor, and they miss out on opportunities on the basis of that. So making sure you have a strong digital footprint and a positive digital footprint is very important. So gaining a competitive advantage and the areas to consider. Just touched on this, making sure your data points are accurate online as well as on your resume, and making sure that they align, and making sure that it makes a clear and concise story of your journey to now. Leaving that positive digital footprint is important. More and more, when we're doing digging on profiles, you might uncover areas that are going to harm an application, and that information is widely available. Pay attention to your Twitter, pay attention to your LinkedIn, and take care when posting online. Think twice, because that kind of information could harm you, but also use it as a positive. Make sure that you're engaging with content online, doing blogs, responding to LinkedIn posts. Being out there is going to improve your chances of developing in your career. As I said, believe in that automated process. It's going to influence every single level, including the executive one. So believe in it and it will help you. If you do not believe in it, it will harm your process. Learning from those tests, I'm not going to go over that again, but essentially the resumes are going to be less and less valued. It's all about going to be that human connection, that human touch point, and engaging with everyone in a process directly, but then also utilizing the technology that's available to you. And make sure you're questioning the process of a senior role if there's limited interaction with a company. I cannot stress this enough. If a full automated system is in place for a C-suite role, you need to consider whether or not you want to apply for that business, because at that level, culture and fit are vital, and engagement with the top hierarchy and the stakeholders is the most valuable aspect to consider. And it needs to be a fit for both sides. And if they're only offering one-way assessment and not both ways, it's probably not going to be a good company for you. So a very brief recap before we open the floor to questions here. Technology adoption is a good thing. It will benefit you. Yes, there are mistakes. We've seen it with the likes of Amazon. Lots of businesses are seeing negative influences of artificial intelligence in recruitment. But the difference is that this technology is being fixed. It's being fixed quickly. And in the long run, it will widely improve candidate experience. So buy into it, because it is going to become the future. It's reducing bias. We're seeing a more diverse data set for businesses. Ultimately, diversity is a profitability for businesses. We've seen it time and time again. It's a really big and important topic, and AI is one of the ways of improving that. So it's going to eliminate the poor decision makers in hiring processes currently. To gain an advantage over others that are in a recruitment process, you need to engage with these processes. Not many people understand the use case of AI in recruitment. If you know what it does and the reasons why it's important, you're far more likely to succeed in the process moving forward. And some of these technologies are so early in adoption that if they're being used, many people won't know how to handle it. But if you know how to do it, you're going to be much higher up the rankings, in a much better chance of getting a role for a business. And then moving into the human interaction, making sure you have that network. If you haven't got one already, making sure that you reach out to a strong network of individuals within the search scene and meeting with them, going for coffee, these kind of interactions, it's worth investing a couple of hours in your day to have that interaction and learn from them and engage with them. I think it's a valuable consulting time for you to involve yourself with that. Educate them on what you're doing right now and what you're looking to do in the future, but also let them assess you and let them give you some feedback on the way that you present yourself. It's a valuable exchange of information. And then finally, using the technology poorly will put you at a disadvantage. So if it's in there, make sure that you take your time in utilizing it, but do not do yourself a disservice by rushing through or not believing in these processes, because it will ultimately harm your career. Now that's it from my side. I do emphasize that if you'd like a copy of this presentation, Discuss AI in Recruitment at all, reach out to Sam or I. You can connect with us on LinkedIn. My contact details, our cells are there and emails are there. Do reach out to us. More than happy to have a conversation and network with you. But for now, I'll leave that there and pass over to David.
All right, James, this is fantastic. Thanks very much. Before we get to the questions, we'll have about 9 minutes left to get through those questions. We'll have to move through them fairly quickly. Just to underscore, why we're here today. We are the UCLA Anderson Alumni Network, and you talked about how that it's the personal connection is more important than ever. And that's why we've done these worldwide Welcome Week events and events throughout the world. So please, those of you in the network, be aware of what's going on the calendar. There are so many chances to create that connection, not just with each other's, but ultimately with recruiters. We have a lot of Anderson alums that are in recruiting functions. And of course, we're partnering with great organizations like Carmichael Fisher and Sam and James. So a lot to consider there. Take advantage of the networks. But let's jump into the questions. And by the way, also the fact that you brought up that 80% of the jobs that are out there are not posted. And another reason why it's so important to make sure that you use AI to your advantage and build your network and build new networks. Would that be correct, James?
Absolutely. I can't emphasize enough that the roles that we work on, a lot of them are confidential. So as a result, they're not pushed out to the public at all. And without that network, it's very difficult to get into those opportunities. So from their perspective, it's vital to be well networked and visible as well.
Great. Let me jump into one of the questions. We have quite a few to go through. One person asks, one of our alums says, what are some of the leading software vendors that are using AI in the recruiting solutions? You mentioned HireVue. Can you mention a few others?
Yeah, so on the job description side, I mentioned eliminating bias. Textio is a fantastic software. So we're seeing that essentially looking at a job description, it compares numerous job descriptions, and this is the data side. So it's looking at a job description and the applicants previously with the same kind of language, and then it alters it and understands how it's going to change. It's fascinating science behind this. But there was one use case where a computer software firm in London used this software, and they were having a real challenge of, as a computer software businesses have this very common issue of struggling to attract female software developers. And they were really struggling. I think roughly 5 to 10% of their applicants were female. And I think they managed to move it up to in the region of 35, 40% just through using that software alone, which really shows the power of AI in that sense. Moving through, HireVue is one of many different video softwares. On the gamification side, you have the likes of Arctic Shores. There are so many out there that utilize it. But then also you've got the job boards and the likes of LinkedIn that have their own inbuilt artificial intelligence softwares as well. So LinkedIn is really pioneering that on that front when it comes to searching for potential profiles. They're learning on the fly there.
Okay, let me jump to the next one. Well, someone asks, the 60% stat that you use that are more likely to stay in a role when interviewed by AI, what's the source of that stat and what data sources were used to come up with that stat?
That's a very good question. I'll get the data. We've lost the lights again. I'm staying still. 1 second. Here we go. So essentially, I'll get all the data points and put them on the end of a presentation. So I don't have the source of that right now, but it is available. So I'll make sure I have that and a references section to this presentation for anyone who wants a copy.
There are a few people that have asked questions about networking strategy and resume specifics. I would encourage you to book a time either on my calendar through the Alumni Career Services website or my colleague Alyssa Harris. So feel free to do that. I'm going to jump more into AI specific questions. Somebody asked, by the way, I will ask this one resume question, which is, in the example that you showed where the achievements were bolded, do you prefer to see bolded achievements, or did you do that just to show the...
No, that was done by the candidate, which I personally prefer. It helps as for us when we are glancing at resumes to understand where to look, especially when you're looking at profiles quite quickly. It's very helpful. You don't need to go over the top with it. Don't bold everything. That's always a risk. I'd say the resume that I showed was verging on almost too much in bold, but it was because there was a lot of good information there. So making sure that you're highlighting the good areas is critical in any way you see fit, really.
Great, and a great question from Michael Thompson in Boston, talking about AI gamification using the biometric sensing. Does that work at all like a lie detector or polygraph? Are you going to be able to tell?
Yeah, absolutely. So it can really judge whether or not you're being genuine, particularly with vocal tones, from my understanding, but also with the facial recognition technology. It can pretty much pick up on how genuine you are. Also, people tend to be more honest when they know they're being interviewed by an artificial intelligence software. So it's a twofold effect when it comes to that kind of thing.
A couple people are asking, are there ways to practice in advance, seeing as though so much is riding on video interviews and AI? Where do you suggest they practice? Partially through video like this, but how do you prepare? Yeah,
so really when you consider an interview process, I think the more you go out and speak with a recruiter, or just learn to sell yourself when you engage with individuals, that's the critical aspect. So learning your pitch, your personal pitch. Why are you strong and successful in your business? What can you offer people? What are your USPs? That's the key area. It's important to note with these kind of technologies that do video interviews without a recruiter, typically they have an option to have a go. So you don't get forced straight into it. They give you a trial run where you can record it and then play it back. And I think that's like an unlimited go with HireVue, for example. So you can have multiple attempts. So you shouldn't feel pressure in that environment. It almost puts you at an advantage, because when you're in an interview with a human, you can say something and go, oh, I really shouldn't have said that. But in this situation, you get multiple goes.
Several people asked about the importance. You talked about having your resume PDF in PDF format. Some companies specifically ask for a Word document. Tell me what you think the pros and cons are, especially when it comes to AI.
Yeah, to be honest, when you in our business, of course, sometimes it is helpful because we obviously naturally reformat profiles. But if your resume is online, I would always have it as a PDF, because websites can change the format of your profile. Sure, if you have an option to have both, do it. It's just occasionally we receive resumes in different document formats that just aren't compatible. So when you're in the first initial discussion, I'd highly recommend having that PDF. And then if they ask for a Word document, go for that. But in most cases, I would say PDF is the way forward, because I've seen strong profiles that come across really badly when they send through an unformatted document at no fault of their own. If you open it up on the right platform, it looks great. But you minimize the chances of doing that by putting it in a PDF.
Great. We are at the end of the hour. Would you maybe give us one concluding statement about the use of AI. And then we again thank both you and Sam for having your contact information available for alums to reach out to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thoughts?
So from my side, all I can say is artificial intelligence is here to stay. It's going to influence everyone's lives, not just in recruitment. So get ready for a real whirlwind in the next few years. But if you get ahead of the game, you're going to be in such a better position moving forward. So I can't recommend enough to really do some research on this topic and engage with it, because it is the future. I will just note that, as you rightly say, David, we have got our contact details here. We love to network. That's the best part of this job, is networking with interesting individuals, providing sound advice for moving forward in their careers. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Well, fantastic. As we wrap this up, and before we wrap it up completely, I want to send out my congratulations to all of the alums that are here at UCLA Anderson, from my boss, who is an alumna named Jill Baldoff, to Regina Ragazzi and Rob Weiler, and so many of the other alums, Alex Lawrence, all the people in admissions, in Partner CMC, and alumni relations, and throughout the school, Pavan Dano in the analytics program. Congratulations to all of you for helping get our ranking up to number 12, and a big welcome to Tony Bernardo for all he's already doing to bring us to the next level. And to you, James, and to Sam, we thank you for sharing this really insightful information with the UCLA Anderson Alumni Network, and we look forward to partnering with you again in the future. So thanks so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you next time you're back in LA.
Absolute pleasure.
Sounds good. Thanks, David. Thanks,
Thanks
James.
so much to you both.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.